All right, today we're going to be focusing on a deal review for a retail and e-commerce company. They're global in nature, and they also have about 150 million in annual revenue. We're going to dive deep into this deal. I want to welcome Matt P to the experience. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to dive into this in a second. Welcome to Revenue on Trial. This is a deal review for a live deal that Mr. P is very interested in closing. So with that, I'm going to set the stage real quick, Matt. First round through, I'm going to ask you a series of yes or no questions. I need to know what you know from the client, not what you think or feel, but what we have actually heard. If I interrupt you, please don't take it personally. And it is completely okay to say, I don't know. The goal here is gap analysis first, strategic forward motion afterward. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Awesome. So when we talk about this company, we talked a little in advance before we hit record. We know that all organizations have revenue growth objectives. And in this instance right now, they are really focused on a growth strategy of driving efficiencies because they are not able to be in a strategic state. The highest level person you have direct access to is the VP of operations in this organization. And let's go through those yes or no's. With this VP of operations, do you believe you have a business issue?
Yes.
You do. All right. Time bound quantifiable. We'll come back to that in a second. Have you been able to introduce problems that the VP of operations says, yeah, okay, those are unique problems that apparently you and your solution can solve uniquely?
Yes.
And they've confirmed that.
Yes.
Confirmed that. Okay. And did you follow up and confirm the business issue and those differentiated problems and solutions in writing?
Yes.
Excellent. When it comes to business value, have you been able to quantify the business value from the buyer's perspective, the impact it'll have organizationally?
Yes. They're kind of vague. They all kind of dance around the same one, but yes.
Okay, got them. And it was confirmed by the prospect, not something quantified by them, but not something we fed them necessarily.
Yes.
Okay. Personal value, you get uncovered personal value?
I did. Yes.
Okay. And it was stated by them, not something we fed them.
Their own word. Yep.
Perfect. And did you, in your follow-up, did you confirm the business value in writing?
I did. Yes.
Excellent. Is the VP of operations the economic buyer, the one who will actually sign the contract?
Yes, they've confirmed they are the signer.
Okay, VP of operations. And do you know, I mean, I think based on some of the conversation we've had, it sounds like they probably have made this size purchase decision before, but are we aware, have they?
They have, yes. Okay. Much larger than this size because it's actually a pilot. So it's going to be a pilot that leads into a larger overall global change. But yes, they have done this before.
All right, perfect. And obviously the price fits logically within the VP of operations budget making, decision making process.
That was the last step we just confirmed.
Perfect. Have we been able to understand who else may be involved in the decision making process and map it out?
Yes. So there's a total of 8 people we've multi-threaded for this.
Okay, 8 people. 8 people involved. You have access to power, obviously, so there's no need to bargain. Are those 8 individuals that you just mentioned, that buying process, confirmed in?
Yes.
Now, last but not least, the plan. Did they agree to a mutual plan where there are steps that get them all the way to value realization, but that have both parties doing something?
Yes, they have. Okay.
It's sounding good. All the steps necessary to get to the data value realization included in that plan?
Yes. Okay. The interesting part, we had a partner that we're working with for another technology, and they've agreed to the mutual plan as well.
Oh, nice. Excellent. Yeah. All right. Have they given you verbal commitment to do business yet?
No, because the next step we're going to do is the demonstration. So as part of the plan, the demos, the next kind of thing, hey, we're going to show this to you. If you guys agree this is, going to work for you. We've already discussed kind of pricing. We'll get down to brass tacks with discounts and stuff, and then they'll give us preference and verbal.
Okay, perfect. And this, I'm assuming that all the plan steps, everything, even this next demo is all confirmed in writing.
Yes.
All right. Let's do some interrogation. So the business issue for the VP of operations, what do you believe it to be?
So for the VP of operations, they've had a essentially failed implementation of a much larger, heavier product that's on-prem. Their own words, we are not seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, and we're not getting any time back. So the investment in this has not bore us any fruit. So what I'd like to do is I want to be able to change this pilot, get this proof of concept going, so we can get the one entity you're going to pilot and prototype around, roll it across the entire organization. And he said, my goal is to get at least half of my time back, because I'm spending hours and hours and hours chasing Band-Aid fixes and things like that. So he said, over the next 12 months, I'd like to be able to do that with the pilot, and then the next follow-on would be the global rollout of this.
Okay. When we think about that, and it's failed pilots before, it's a system of some description. The first question that I would ask is, why is that a priority?
The priority for them is they can't scale with what they got, right? We can't scale from an efficiency or a revenue standard perception, because we are literally just fighting ourselves on both sides of it. The other thing, they have a really high SKU turnover, so they only get 9 months of performance out of a SKU. They roll over every year, and that's causing them a whole bunch of problems. So them being able to go, hey, we'd like to modify these or track these or force rank these, they can't do that today. They essentially are flying blind and have to manually rip and replace almost all of their SKUs, which is almost 20,000 SKUs every year.
Okay. Would it be fair to kind of restate that a little bit and say that perhaps the VP of Ops business issue is that person's been tasked to ensure that operationally the organization is in a state where it can scale, and they have X amount of time to do that?
I think so. I think that'd be fair.
So that'd be more of a time bound, that'd be the time bound quantifiable business issue, because the system itself, granted that VP of operations is their primary focus, but the system itself is actually would fall into that category of problem, right? And if it hasn't been explicitly stated that that is what it is, we're making an assumption, right? That the business issue is that state of scalability. So probably need to confirm that during the next meeting, is when you do your review. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so.
Right. So I'm going to put some notes in here for a cleaner BI. I'll even give you the question to ask. Is it because you're on the hook for scale state? Scale state. We're attached to right now, it sounds like a problem, right? To get that system up and running. So if we're right, this is what to de-risk it. If we're right and we're focused on getting that system in there because they're tired of messing with everything that's failed before, and the idea, the business issue is to get to that state of scalability, ready for scale. If we're correct in that assumption, that means we don't have the BI confirmed. And it could be, if we're wrong, there could be some impact. So if we are wrong about the BI, what's the risk we run with the deal?
Well, if we can't tie it to BI, the value's not going to get them what they need, right? They're gonna ultimately say, well, this isn't worth the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Right. Or, I mean, I think that definitely agree with you. I think another thing that probably would concern me would be, what if something else comes across the VP of Ops plate that seems to deliver that future state faster, right? Not in this situation I don't think that's a high priority. I'd rather be prepared for it than be surprised by it, though, right? Just in case. Is that fair?
It is fair, and this is an interesting one because they came with us as a platform already decided. So they said, we know we want to go with this platform, with this e-commerce platform. So we know that already. We need to prove that to ourselves with a pilot, though. So that's why they're like, this is kind of top priority to get it into the hopper, so that when we roll this out, we can get it rolled across the entire organization.
So they'd already evaluated. Well, I don't want to say
they had done research.
They've done some research.
They did some research and kind of came to the conclusion, said this is the logical one based on the research and sort of the testimonials we can find. We've decided that, and then that's when they said, hey, we want to work with a consultative partner that can help us implement this.
Right. So like every buyer, right? They went out, they felt the pain. There was an urgency for them to look for a solution. They decided this was a solution. They did some homework on it, came prepared, and now it's the pressure test, which is, that's just real, right? That happens all of the time with every buyer that you deal with. And not necessarily in this case, but I know you've seen it before, where a sales rep will get connected to that time-bound quantifiable problem and think that that's the driving business issue. And then there's risk, just like we're uncovering here. So just being able to confirm that as you move forward, I think just helps de-risk it, right? So because we do want this one across the finish line as fast as possible. In terms of the business value, what have you quantified? What are those metrics and what's the quantification look like?
Yeah. So to the best of their, value they could provide, the business value for both the VP of Ops and the Director of Ops, which is the starting point for this project, they're like, we're spending literally 50% of our day, 50% daily, monkeying with this, hooking and laddering this, fixing this, putting out fires, constantly getting, pucked into, hey, we're having this problem or this thing broke. There's no version control, so they're continually doing things. We call it the big ass spreadsheet BAS system. They're doing that in the BAS system. So they're spending hours going in, and it's not version control. So somebody saw the old one, so they're spending half their day every day doing that. The other wrinkle to here with business value is they actually, after we started the project, I'd say about halfway through the pursuit, which is probably 3 months now, they got a new VP of IT. So that introduced a whole change. So I had to, multi-thread with him. We had 1 or 2 meetings with the old VP of IT, who I think was responsible for kind of selecting this large thing that didn't get off the ground. And his business value is, it's because he's so new to the organization. He goes, well, obviously time, because just hearing these guys talk about it. He also kind of said, look, I don't have the ability to do anything within the organization until I understand it. And with the current platform, there's you can't reverse engineer the platform. There's just too much to try to unwind. So there's a bunch of tribal knowledge for him. He couldn't quantify that really well. I was like, if you're going to quantify that, he's like, I don't know enough to give you kind of a number around that, but he was pretty spectacular with his personal value. He likes my first job with my first project with a new gig, and I want to do a really good job. So his personal value is just like, get this thing done correctly.
And that was the VP of IT.
Yeah, the one that came.
Okay. Yeah. So, it sounds like all of them, based on the conversation, it sounds like all of them it's like an albatross system. The current system's an albatross around their neck. They don't know enough to make strategic decisions. So they're kind of in gridlock, a survival mode, if you will.
Every day is just Band-Aid. Yeah. Every day is just kicking the can down the road.
Yeah. And that is difficult to quantify for sure. I've got some ideas for you. We can talk about in a minute. Let me jot this down. All right. Okay. So we've got personal value for sure. Definitely time. We could potentially, work on quantifying the time on impact on the business side. So if the person costs X and they're expected to produce Y impact, but 50% of their time, so you're looking at a 50% loss on half of the fully burdened cost of that employee. We could get a little creative if we had to. That may be something to think about as you get closer to the negotiation, or see, if there are other impacts. You mentioned the SKU stuff. Does that drag down the average customer value, or how much they spend, or how much they can spend? Like, there could be some things to look at there potentially, but it's not something we want to force at this point. Is that fair?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. All right. Perfect. What's the risk if we don't get to quantification, though?
If we don't get to quantification, the value still, I think, is overly vague, right? There is an organization have kind of confirmed, yes, collectively we are spending an inordinate amount of time on this. They couldn't say, yeah, hour to hour, perfect. But if we don't get to value, that still remains vague, because it's like, well, what does solving this get you? Obviously, it'll get the time back, but how much and how often and how painful, those kind of things, they're still trying to quantify. And in fairness, they said, hey, we gave up trying to measure it because it's so painful. We just kind of got to a point where it's like, it's half a day. That's what we're doing. Sometimes it's a full day. They said, hey, sometimes I spend my whole day doing this. Sometimes I spend some weekends doing this. So as quantifiable as they could make it, because it's organizational wide, and all 8 of them that we've talked to have said the same thing. Like, I'm just chasing my tail.
They're all on the same page, and they all recognize the pain, which is great. We've got alignment there. And look, sometimes, in some of these opportunities, you can't get to as explicit quantification as we may like. But what sounds really good is that everybody's saying the same thing. They're all singing from the same songbook. right?
Yeah.
They're all unified in that vision. The challenge, yeah, again, the challenge would be if there's 8 of them, that means there's 8 different business issues. They may all agree on a unified problem, but there's different reasons why it's impacting them. If things start to feel less than stable with the opportunity or the deal, maybe could invest or look at digging into some of those, a couple of those other people, and seeing if we can get their time bound quantifiable business issues so we could have a value conversation to quantify it potentially in the future. Does that seem reasonable?
No, it does. It definitely does.
Let's see. Others for the others. Okay. Um, so it sounds like you've got 8 people involved. I've heard VP of IT. I've heard VP of Ops. Have we asked about legal, how they buy?
We have.
Okay. And have we asked about, in this instance, because we're anonymizing things, there's some questions that I would normally ask that I don't want to, but in the solution that you could be providing, is there an AI component, or has it been AI washed in any way? Is it positioned as a potential
They
having AI enablement in it?
they've decided that's a forward-facing phase because this is a pilot.
Okay.
There is AI and there's AI availability to this, but they want a bite-sized piece this before they run it across, right? It's the other challenge with trying to get quantifiable business is like we're replacing one small portion of this to get proof of concept to then roll it out across the entire organization, right? That's where they're kind of like solving this for this piece gets me this much of it, and then solving it holistically is the
Right.
next bite of the apple. That's where I get the whole enchilada kind of
The whole
solved.
deal. In understanding the organization, is there potentially an IT team, an InfoSec team, an AI committee that has been tasked or will want to do an in-depth security review that may slow down the sales velocity for this into phase 2? Does that
No,
role exist? Have we asked
yeah,
those questions at all?
they have those roles, but it's an inherent product with security are baked into it, so we don't have to prove the security to them. They've done
Okay.
their research, and it's a proven enterprise platform. So they're like, no, we're comfortable with that. We don't have to
Okay.
go.
So it's really the brand trust that's getting you through that potential snag, right? With a lot of reps we talked to today, when that comes up, some organizations don't even have their AI committees or processes formed, and that comes out of nowhere. So the fact that it is an enterprise trusted system, they're basing that on trusting the brand.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
and I mean, there's compliance and everything's public, right? So they said, yeah, it meets all of our needs for what we do. So they won't have that risk.
Okay. And then because of, I mean, for the size of the organization, you may not have a procurement team. Is there a procurement team inside of this org?
This is the procurement team. This eight
This,
person. Yeah, this is
like,
the
not that
body.
we want to add any more people to the deal.
Yeah,
Like, 8's a good number. Like, let's keep it
yeah. It's like,
manageable.
hey, is there anyone else that needs to be impacted by this? I mean, we've got CEO down, right? So it's this is the procurement team for this. Legal's the only one we haven't touched yet. And I said, what is it normally taking? Like, it's a 2-week turn for us usually. So I said,
Okay.
okay, we'll back end into that because they do have kind of a target rollout for this, and they want to run with a period of a minimum of a quarter to be like, we want to stable for a quarter before we, go on to the next phase. So
Right.
they've considered that, but that's the only person I haven't touched, 1-to-1 yet to say, hey, walk me through what this process looks like. But they did say, yeah, it's
Okay.
about 2 weeks for us. So.
Okay. Perfect. And then the plan has all of the steps. Anything that you're concerned about? Like, all 8 people have seen that plan and confirmed it.
Yeah, and they have been on every call, which has been interesting to schedule. We've had everybody. And the only one I've not talked with one-on-one is their controller. So their controller, and she purposely said, hey, I can't even do reporting now. And she wants to see the demo. And then she said, I'd like to have some additional time once we see the demo because I'll have more questions. Everyone else I've had, a touch with and walked through and said, what are you trying to do? And unfortunately, they're all on the same page, which makes it hard to be like, how do I again, they're all on the same page. It's a good story, but it's like, well, I don't have a lot of levers to pull if they're all in agreement on everything, right? It's like, cool,
Yeah.
sounds good, but yeah, everyone else is kind of in agreement with what they're trying to do. And plan wise, from the beginning when we walked through kind of the high level and then refine, because we had to have multiple discoveries within. Normally we can do, hey, we can usually knock this out in one discovery call. We had to do 2. We had the additional platform partner because we do one, platform technology, they do the other. We've had to kind of plan out with them too. So we started with a higher level plan that we've refined as we've gone. But yeah, they've always been in agreement and going through the validation deck. They're like, yep, those are the best next steps for us. We agree that makes the most sense. And that
Okay.
gets us to the value realization within the time period they're kind of wanting it to be.
Okay. With that partner involvement, right? So you've got two entities selling into one, essentially. Is there any concern that the partner, let's not ask it that way, let's be nice. Have you had conversations with the partner and been able to get a vision match with them about why together we make the best solution?
Yes.
Okay.
And they've kind of let me take the lead on this. We're a larger chunk of what it is. They're an important component, but we're, more of the system of record that's more important to start with. And they've worked with us and our platform before. So we're not starting from scratch, but we have had to go and confirm, hey, these are how we run it. How would you guys like to do it? There's certain things we demo. They don't actually have to demo their product because it's, the basis and nature of it. It's kind of like, yeah, you can go find it and see it. So it's one of those things we just had to kind of make sure we're on the same page. Like, here's how we're going to do this. This is what we need to run through. Here's the steps we run through. And they had the same, like, we don't need this demo step. We'll be riding in the canoe with you guys. We have to do that demo step. And they were all, they confirmed that's fine too. They're like, yeah, the 8-person team was like, yeah, we totally are on page with that because we don't need that.
Okay. So we've got, so when we think about the QP formula, right, differentiated vision match, we've got chunks of it, right? They see how it's different. They had done their research. They were already leaning towards this type of solution, but we kind of feel a little soft on the BI. We may need to go back and just make sure that we're stating that higher level direct impact to the organization. Sound reasonable?
I think so.
Okay. On the other side, on value, get to value, personal value, I'm really impressed because you have it sounds like across the board because they're all in agreement on the impacts that it's having without the quantification, no matter how loud they are in professing their agreement, still run the risk that it could impact our negotiation down the line because we don't have something quantifiable. Potential ways to solve it in future conversations, if you feel it going that direction, would be having conversations with some of those other 8, find out what their business issue is, and then what metrics they're going to really want to impact. Because this sounds like this current system is keeping them from impacting the metrics they want to. So maybe at some point could ask them what are the metrics they are the most focused on, and what would they be able to achieve with the system, right? So potentially when we get to that point, weaving in some of those questions might be helpful and further de-risk the deal.
Yeah, and some of the challenge around that, like we have a director of purchasing that's involved, and he doesn't have KPIs because he's like, we can't get information out of this system. We don't even use purchase orders in this current one, so I don't even really know what to add. I just know what I have to do, but right. It's like, well, are you doing ABC classification, any KPIs? No, we don't have any information on that. We're rip and replace SKUs. So it's been a challenge to try to get around some of those KPIs because they're like, we're in such a hole, we can't really define some of those for you. And I was like,
okay. Yeah. Could potentially, just continuing to kind of brainstorm and think strategically, if I'm having conversations with any of those 8 and they're so caught up in the pain right now, could it be possible to ask a probing question, but feed them a little and be like, hey, in organizations like yours, the other VP of Ops that we've dealt with have told us that they are measured on X, Y, and Z. I know you're having a hard time focusing on that now, but let's think future state for a second. Once this system is fixed, when you then have to turn around and say to the CEO or the board or whoever, this is the impact they had, what are the metrics you're going to most likely report, and what are the targets you're going to aim for? Potentially something we could weave in, get them thinking future state, maybe get something that if for some reason this had to go up the food chain for additional approvals, they at least would have a quantification story.
I think that's a fair thing to do. They've kind of talked around, hey, giving us the tool for this will let us define that a little clearer. So I think some of the value is them being like, we can decide that as we go, because right now we're flying so blind. We can't really, know what we don't know. We know we don't know this. Okay, well, does safety stock give you? Yeah, safety stock would be good. Okay, does ABC classification? Like they're to the point where like yes, but that would let them get strategic about the KPI would be. That's
Right.
and that's where the interesting thing part of this being a pilot is they're like we would like to kind of compartmentalize this and get to that where we could say yeah these KPIs are now something we can actually make to measure because right now it's complete shenanigans.
Yeah. So I mean, right. And look, we've all seen it, right? There are situations where the pain and the time impact, everybody's, and I know this is funny me saying this, but pulling their hair out, trying to get clear so they can actually do their job. So it's really difficult to think about what are those impacts. I think maybe if we ask those questions, if we ask some of those, like, hey, all right, let's just for a second look ahead into the future. And here's what I've heard from other VPs of IT or VPs of ops or insert role, right? Whoever you're talking to. These are a couple of the metrics. You're leading the witness a little bit, but it could potentially get them to a point where you could even do some back of napkin quantification. But I think more importantly, it allows them all to tell the story internally in a way that is received by CEO or board who may not be feeling that pain in a way that makes sense for the business. It's like, yeah, the VP of operations say, look, I can't get a scalable because the system is horrible. But now I tell the story of, hey, this system is keeping me from being able to deliver you X. And even if they can't quantify it, just being able to keep that business level conversation that way so it resonates to the people who may not be directly impacted, I think is probably a way to help de-risk it. So if it has to go somewhere else, the story is more about business impact than people pulling their hair out, not having access to the information. Seem reasonable?
It does. And one little shade of gray up on this too. They've actually brought like we have retention issues as a result of this. Like we're
Okay.
losing people, and so I was like
Perfect.
that's again kind of hard to quantify because like well how many and they're like here or there, and it's not just the retention, it's the recruiting because like they're having a hard time getting people to come join them as a result of this. Like, what tech stack are you using? What are you solving? They're telling them
So
like
you're talking about employee retention.
yes, yes.
All right. So employee retention, recruitment, easy to quantify, right? You could even, I mean, you could easily do web search, talk to Chat GPT or Claude, and I think you get to kind of a fully burdened kind of rough estimate. And then the cost of recruitment is usually 1.5x what somebody costs to begin with. So if they have to recruit 10 new roles or 5 new roles, and the conservative price is X, and now all of a sudden you're not having that problem, or it's delayed by a certain amount. Now we're getting into places that we could even give them a nugget, right? Give them a nugget of this is it's keeping us from doing this. We can get better people. We can keep them longer. We don't shed the tribal knowledge that's internally. So now you get into something that is quantifiable.
And I've led them a little bit, and I was like, normally, it's 4 to 5x to replace somebody, and like that's if we can replace them. So
Okay, and
it's
that's
4 to 5x so they get the door, and they're like that elongation. I was like, all right, and that's where they're kind of like, it's hard. Some of this we haven't resolved to be able to say, yeah, we know what this is yet because we haven't had the replacements, and yeah, so it's been interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be great around value, right? Just get some key metrics that you can pepper the story with, even get some rough numbers on the retention that you get their agreement on. And again, it may not be the depth of quantified business value because the time one is the biggest one everybody's focused on. I think it'll just help. I think it'll help de-risk the deal for people that are tired of hearing the squeaky wheel. Like when I was an executive, there was always the squeaky wheel. Hell, sometimes I was the squeaky wheel, right? But the business makes decisions based off of the impact. So I think that would be a great way to de-risk it. You've got the power, locked down, maybe continuing to maintain that sounds great. And the plan with all of the steps, making sure that, we're sticking to that. If I had to prioritize the gaps, I would say you probably have power locked in. Plan sounds solid. We've got a little bit of work to do on the differentiated vision match and business value. And I probably would prioritize, I would prioritize the business issue for your VP of Ops as number one, and then getting and weaving in those value conversations, quantifiable or just metrics they can seed into the story, something that they can use to tell the story internally. Does that seem fair?
No, it does. It does. I think that's, I think it's one of those things where we kind of start with one. We had some team turnover. We kind of went through like, hey, this is where we were. This is the backstory. Got that VP of IT plugged in. Went through that kind of business issue, and he just kind of was like, I have to just kind of follow their lead because he was weeks into the job. So I do think that's one where it's like we're continually putting that validation deck in front of them, and they're continually to talk through it. They're kind of unpacking it as we go, and that's where that employee retention kind of came out as we were going through. I wish I remembered who said it. I think it might have been the controller that might have brought up the employee point for value when we were going through it. And I said, "Oh, I'll add that to the next one," and we did. So I was like, "Oh, that's
well, good." Yeah. I mean, I think that's really cool. So because employee retention and recruitment impacts all 8 of those individuals in some way, shape, form, or fashion. So if you can't get them to think future state, then getting them to think about not being able to have the people in those roles, what does that impact? You got metrics on either side. Pretty much I just recommend, thinking through some of those probing questions and weaving those into the conversation just to shore it up. And with the next time you do what we've heard to date at the beginning of the next meeting, just slip in and say, hey, to the VP of operations. Usually when we hear people focusing on systems, and you've mentioned scale, I'm translating that to your primary concern is making sure the organization is in a scalable state ASAP. Time-bound, quantifiable, directly impacts the strategy for growth. Seem good?
Seems good.
Awesome. So I have been obviously taking notes on the OAT. I'll shoot you over that copy for your records. Your perspective on having done this, 1 or 2 things that are aha or takeaways, or it's totally fair to say, hey, because I know the value selling framework as well as I do, this was a no-brainer, but would love to know kind of aha moments or impacts to spending the time.
No, this was the first one I've been doing with the value selling framework where I had an impactful enough change in flight. I haven't had that often enough. Our sales cycle isn't that elongated. It's a matter of months, like not 6. We can do it in 3 to 4. And so I haven't typically had that being an issue, or that was already the problem. Like, hey, we lost our controller. We need this help as a result of that. So it was a pre-existing one. This kind of like, hey, meet this guy. And then a week later, don't talk to that guy anymore. And then there's this new guy who came from a different background, and I had to really build. That was an interesting change for me to try to go back and re-explain the company to them. Like, hey, from my understanding, this is what I got. That was a pretty interesting aha moment. The validation was huge, though, to be able to have all this packaged up. Here you go. It was really easy to regurgitate, and he was consumable. And he's like, hey, this is a lot cleaner than kind of what I got told, because I think, you get in, they just shotgun with you. That one's good. And then I do think, having done this enough and kind of drilling into value, the challenge of this being like, hey, this solves this problem, but we're only going to solve this portion of it in a pilot is where I've had a challenge. Like, that's hard to quantify, because even if we get to the initial stage for this, it's solving this much of the value for them. So it's been challenging to kind of get into that, hey, let's think bigger picture, or like, today, what does that give you? Well, give us this, and then tomorrow, that's been interesting to learn around. And just try. And
it creates a challenge in the sales process, because they're so focused on the pilot working that oftentimes the buyers will end up not evaluating beyond the pilot, and then you end up in a situation where like, yeah, pilot went well, but it made me think about this, and this. So now we got to go look at something else, and that balance of asking those future looking questions versus the current impacts of the employee retention or not having the right people, I think becomes a great way to bridge that, right? To bridge that and make sure we don't find ourselves getting surprised.
Yeah, and they're real excited. They're already in the new world. I'm like, you guys remember this other part's still going to be there.
Yeah, look at the plan letter. Like, there's steps that
this is just one small piece. Like, yeah, we don't like that. We're going to get rid of it. Cool, but you can't, because these other guys are going to still use it. Oh yeah, that's right. So it's been interesting because they're so excited to get to the finish line that they're like, yeah, let's just do that. I'm like, well, hold on, this still has to operate for this other entity. So it's been really interesting to thread the needle with that quantifiable value for them. Trying to, like, yes, eventually that value will be there, but you guys obviously can't take that big of a bite, and then trying to imagine that world where like, well, that would do this or that would do that. It's been interesting to get all the kind of shades of gray. And as we go, and you've seen this before, those always come out a little bit more in the wash as you start to go.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we have this problem. Oh, also this thing. Cool. I'll add it to the list that's now this long. And trying to kind of wrap back around that has been interesting because it's not as quantifiable as I think I would like it to be for the framework, just because they're like, this is what we think it is. I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to go with your own kind of quantify. I'm not going to paint seagulls into your picture for it, but it's been challenging to try to get that.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that. Awesome, man. I really appreciate, Matt, you spending the time with us here on Revenue on Trial. Anybody paying attention, if you want to see the anonymized opportunity assessment tool, there's a link in the show notes. If you want to volunteer to be on the show, to do a deal review for something that you are focused on, that you care about, that we can get really tactical. There's a link for that as well in the show notes. We look forward to seeing you all again, and I really appreciate it, Matt. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.